Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with an Airborne deck and Broken Arrow that has helped me considerably to increase my ELO from about 500 where it was before I started using this deck to over 900 where it is right now. Not quite 1,000, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people, oh you don't have 1500 ELO, you shouldn't talk about the game, to which I reply, I've spent a good amount of time actually looking at what people are using at 1500 at the highest level. For instance, if I go into the leaderboards right here, the player who is currently rank 1, he's done so with a lot of tanks, as you can see based on the mills. The person who's rank 2, he's done it with a lot of air power and with infantry. So infantry, regardless of what you might think, is actually quite good. But you need to use it properly. So there's going to be a lot of things that if you're going to use a deck like this, you're going to need to understand. Sitting with infantry on a point is the worst way to use it. In fact, I've held 3-4 control points in matches with no units whatsoever. And actually no units in a perimeter even necessarily around them, because I'm able to control the zone through air power, for recon, all that. So this is what this deck is focused on. Air power, air mobility, reconnaissance. Now, it doesn't necessarily have the best level of air power, but it does have quite a few advantages in a number of ways. Now, normally I would go tab by tab, but I think I need to talk about some of the key aspects of this deck. First off, we have the B1 B Lancer, the B2 Spirit, and our F15 and F22. Let's start with the F15EX and F22. Why do I have an F22? Why do I have an F15EX? Well, the F22 is good at one thing with those AIM missiles, those AIM 260 missiles, JATMs. These kind of missiles in real life, if you look at the history of long-range missiles, they were not designed to shoot down other jet fighters. If you look at the F-14 Tomcat, it was designed to take down Soviet bombers. And so if you look at these kind of long-range missiles, they can be used against jets in real life, but that's not what they're designed for. They're designed to hit big targets. So you're thinking AWACS, you're thinking bombers, you're thinking about anti-submarine warfare planes. That's what they're designed for. And that's the role of the F-22. It's not there to win air battles. It can do pretty well in that respect, not the best necessarily. Because those missiles are long range, but they're going to have some issues with a lot of fast movers if you're getting swarmed by enemy planes. But if your opponent is bringing in a transport plane, if they're bringing in an AC-130, if they're bringing in a strategic bomber, an F-22 with afterburner is going to take it out pretty quickly with these 4 missiles. So 2 AIM 260s per pod, per bay. 4 of them, long range. That's what they're designed for. That's what you should use them for. Then, 1 F-15EX. If I could have 2 of each, that would be great, but 1 of each. 1 F-15EX with a bunch of missiles on it. AIM 120s and Sidewinder missiles. And I'll explain the Sidewinders. So, the F-15 can carry a lot of missiles and can loiter a fairly good amount of time. The reason they can loiter a good amount of time is you can install 2 fuel tanks. So, you can keep this F-15 for a good period of time until it gets shot down, or you're forced to abort because enemy missiles are coming towards you, but you can keep it on station for a decent amount of time. And it certainly has the missiles to boot. So over here I have 10 AMRAAMs on it. 8 from one pod, 2 from another. I haven't gone with anything on the center line, and I haven't installed the designation pod. You can do so if you want to, but that's not what I'm using the F-15EX. This is a missile truck, as you'd call it. It's got so many missiles, air-to-air missiles. The value proposition with the AIM 9s, the Sidewinders, is to take down helicopters. Can be useful in a knife fight, and, you know, people talk about, like, how dogfighting isn't a thing in modern air warfare. Not with guns, no, but with missiles, that is a different discussion altogether. So I think dogfighting capability is important, and that's the reason I would mention F-15EX, because it is a very agile plane. Like, if we look at this plane, the speed, the turn radius, all that kind of stuff, F-22 is a good plane, don't get me wrong, but this is just better in terms of its capability, though it does lack stealth. So different planes for different purposes. The F-22 is when you want to go in sneakily and take long-range shots, the F-15 is your knife fighter. I generally bring the F-15 early on in a match, and then I bring the F-22 if I need to. That's kind of how I use them. Bombers, I have the B-1B Lancer. There's all kinds of payloads, and I think dependent on what you're starting to deal with in matches, you do have different options. It would be nice to be able to switch things on the fly. You can make different decks where you just make one adjustment or something like that. But anyway, over here I've installed 8 cruise missiles on it. Not 24. I think you're not really realistically going to be able to fire 24 cruise missiles. Besides these ALCMs, they're just better. Because they do have a higher radius that they'll hit, they'll do more damage than the JSSMs. Now, in real life, accuracy is important, but here we do want some splash damage because vehicles will move, air defense and all that, so you do want a bit of splash damage, especially because you might be hitting things from an approximate distance. Then B2 Spirit with the nuke, so if the enemy is foolish enough to concentrate forces, and believe me, in a lot of matches they will, you drop a nuke on their asses. B2 Spirit will generally get it done, though keep in mind angles of approach with regards to it, because you got to pay attention to what the enemy is going to do with regards to air defenses. That's why Recon is so important in this game. It's something a lot of people do underappreciate. AC-1 Furry, a bunch of things on it. I've installed pretty much everything I could on this. Not necessarily very important to get this stuff. The AC-1 Furry, what it is, it's a distraction carnifex, if you are familiar with Warhammer tabletop terms. But basically, this is a big-ass juicy target. It can take a number of hits. So if you're looking to distract the enemy, maybe to get a bunch of B cruise missiles on target, maybe to distract for the B2 Spirit, this is the role that the AC-130 has. It's not there to do damage. It's there to take damage, because it will take multiple air-to-air missiles or ground-to-air missiles, multiple SAMs, to take down an AC-1 Furry. And it's not something an opponent can ignore. Even if they have their radars active, even if they're using their air defenses actively, sure, you might just prioritize things for a bit, but a lot of people are kind of lazy, and that's, by the way, a lot of the assumptions for this deck. Because like when I first got a game, I was like, get a balanced deck. It's useful to have all kind of things in your toolkit, because otherwise you'll have critical weaknesses. But then you notice that people on all levels, I'm not just talking what I've played, but what I've seen in videos and games people have posted, like, people do this a lot. They form infantry defensive line in cities and buildings and all that. They bring supplies and artillery and all that kind of stuff. But they undervalue, of course, on a higher level less so, but a lot of people are really reluctant to get air units killed, right? So you know that you're going to have defensive lines. You're going to know that there's going to be a lot of people that are static. You know there are going to be supplies. This deck is built around that, right? Which brings me to the star of the show, the C-17 Global Master. This may seem a bit ridiculous, but it's actually the most important plane in this entire deck. Let me explain why. You can bring helicopters, but helicopters have problems unloading infantry, and also speed can be detected, all that. A C-17 will be detected, but it's also very hard to shoot down a transport plane. That's because this thing is reasonably fast, can carry a lot of stuff. And again, angles of approach, line of sight. Basically, what the C-17 or any transport plane is going to take advantage of is the tendency of people to put their air defenses way back in the match, even including their SHORAD. And SHORAD is not going to take down a C-17 easily, I can tell you that. You'll need Patriots or S-300s to do so reliably. But the value proposition is you load this up with a lot of stuff, you drop it right on a control point, and you take it over. And then you can kill everything in sight as well. That's where Special Forces infantry comes in. So yeah, Special Forces and Airborne are really contributing a lot. And the fun fact about the C-17, you can load tanks on this thing. I'm not joking. You see these Thunderbolts? These M8 Thunderbolts? I can load 4 of these. I can't get 4 of these in the deck, at least not with this capability, but I can get 4 of these in the Global Master and drop them right on the middle of an enemy point. You know, it's scary enough to get dealing with things like Delta Force dropping on your ass on a control point. It's very damn scary when you start seeing a C-17 dropping tanks from the sky and all kinds of different things as well. So that is the heart of the deck. Just having that penetration capability in an enemy line. Again, you gotta be careful how you use it. You can't just roll it over from middle of enemy air defenses and expect to survive. It will die, and you'll lose a lot of points in the process. But the goal here is to control it in such a way that it's going through an angle that by the time it's detected even by the enemy and they start shooting at it, it's already dropped or starting to drop all kinds of things. And also, we do have the overkill situation on a lot of air defenses. People are complaining at it. So keep in mind, balance changes. And obviously, the higher the ELO you're talking about, the higher the level of play. People are going to be better at higher ELO with like regards to air defense. But APM doesn't exist in Broken Arrow. We should probably call it APH. Like, the games I've seen, the games I've played, like, I've seen people with 1k ELO play in the most static, bad way you can imagine. And that's not a joke, really. Anyway, so that's the air power situation. Also understanding Recon. Let's talk about that affair, right? So we got two RQ-170 Sentinels. These are great detection. Actually hard for an enemy to deal with. They need to activate their radars on their air defenses. Like, people who are smart will do this, so you'll lose a lot of this. But I want to emphasize this. Losing a lot of drones, you might say, oh, you're losing 170. Well, it doesn't matter if you're losing it. They'll reveal themselves. So you can hit them with a bunch of cruise missiles. They'll showcase their position. And crucially, you can get a lot of information on this. Like, they can be shot down from across the map if people start activating their radars, but you gotta make that conscious decision, and it does come with drawbacks. I think seed is one of the things that this deck does lack. I mean, you could get it technically if you want to, but this is not really... This is about hard-hitting capability, not about keeping a position. You'll be able to take a position. You'll be able to do a lot of damage. The big downside of this deck is you're not going to be able to hold the positions very well. You can take, lose, move on, raid, harass, all that. And believe it or not, I've won a lot of matches with this damn thing since I started using it. But yeah, RQ-170, MQ-9 Reaper. So drones, yeah, scouting capability. I've also installed Hellfire and Stingers on the Reaper, so just a bit of damage capability, but given how people are using air defenses, SHORAD, all that kind of stuff, it's going to be tricky. I do have some Avengers over here for some anti-helicopter defense, but yeah, it's going to be dicey dealing with having good air defense over here. You just don't have the capability with like this Airborne deck. And that's the thing, you're going to lack Patriots, you're going to lack seed capacity. There's a lot of issues with this deck. Like, there's a lot of weaknesses with this deck, but it is built around the assumption that people play in certain ways, and you can assume people are going to bring a lot of stuff. And even if they don't bring Patriot, I don't care if team member B, who's sitting on his axe, gets wiped out because he just got nuked because he's sitting with all his units in a nice turtle position. I care about taking 4 control points and inflicting far more casualties on the opponent than I take. Then we have Ranger snipers. I've put anti-material rifles. I just want for them to have that kind of anti-vehicle capability, but really they're mainly there for recon. I don't like suppressed sniper rifles versus an RPG. Well, AT missile anyway. But the point is here, just a bit of anti-tank capability over here for these snipers. Not a lot. They won't do a lot of damage, but they can be useful in a pinch, transported by some Silent Hawks. And we have Green Berets with flash weapons. The reason I've chosen flash is because this gives them a decent amount of capability to deal with enemy units that are garrisoning buildings. So you can use Green Berets, not necessarily to enter the building and kill things, but to shoot at them with the flash with their shotguns and all that. Basically killing infantry and buildings from across the street. STTs, they have all kinds of different weapons. You could put the flashbangs, but we do have a unit specifically for that role that's much better for that role. So instead, I've gone with, as opposed to pararescue, I've gone with special tactics team. Having a Stinger is useful. Having all these kind of different weapons is useful. These guys, mostly though, recon. Like, everything in recon is there for recon. Any kind of combat ability is secondary. So, and that's kind of the important thing to mention here. Is like, this deck is built around the idea information is power. Because if you know where the enemy air defenses are, if you know where the artillery are, well, you can drop cruise missiles on them. Or you can drop a whole bunch of infantry on them when they least expect it. Trust me, when you sneak up across the enemy line and you just start blowing up all the artillery and air defenses, they'll panic like hell. Some people might even rage quit if you do enough damage. That may or may not have happened in a number of games. Then an M8TV with a Javelin on top of it. Decent enough recon vehicle. Javelin does a good amount of damage. Not much more need to be said on that, but you kind of want to use some of these lighter vehicles to just sneak around the flanks and try and get information or do some damage on the flanks, but mostly information. Then we have, I'll get into the infantry last. Support-wise, we have some MTVs for the sake of supplies, Avengers for the sake of anti-helicopter capability, because that's one of the problems that is going to be with regards to this deck. The capability of shooting down helicopters is not what I prioritize here at all. Brutus, pretty good artillery unit, has a 105mm gun right here, has guided rounds. Since you have a bunch of sneaky infantry, you can potentially, you know, get that kind of... laser designation, you know, it's kind of a bit iffy on a lot of times to actually get that sorted out. So I don't really care about it, but you do have it. That's the important thing. Like, you do have it on several units as, and so if you can get those guided shells on target, Brutus will do good amount of damage. There's also the ability of going with Hawkeyes, but I've chosen to go with just Brutus because I did want to have those Avengers, but you could just remove those Avengers and go with more artillery if you want to in your deck and rely on your infantry for air defenses. It has its issues. Having an Avenger means that you can move from, you know, you can move to intercept helicopters buried, so that's the reason I've chosen it. But yeah, that's the role of the Brutus guided rounds. Can go with all kinds of things, cluster rounds, all that kind of good stuff that you do have available. Maybe I should actually go with cluster rounds, all this, but yeah, these guys, really good. So between cruise missiles, between nukes, between an AC-130, you have a lot of standoff capability with this deck. And that capability, and then you have the capability of dropping in tanks on top of an enemy. The M8 Thunderbolt is, I think, genuinely the best tank in the game from a number of perspectives. Like, there's a reason why I put it in one of the in the video on the subject of best armor vehicles. Now, to be clear, when I say it's one of the best tanks or the best tank, it's not the question of capability. Like, an Abrams fully upgraded, the Tarmata is gonna tear through this easily. But the value of the M8 Thunderbolt is the fact that it's cheap. So it's a cheap tank. You can drop it via planes. You can drop all 3 via plane. If you could get 4, you can. If you get 4 in the deck, you can drop all 4 in a deck. It's got Iron Fist APS. It's got a 120mm gun, and it might just be the best tank gun in the entire game. Like, this is not a tank. This is a tank destroyer. Like, think of that from this perspective. Yeah, think of a World War II light armor tank destroyer. What was it? The M10 tank destroyer that the Americans used. But this is much better than any tank destroyer in World War II because it has a 120mm gun that is really accurate, fires very fast, and just does a lot of freaking damage. You won't win a long-term engagement with an Abrams, but you can kill an Abrams, which is not something you can say about a lot of other cheap tanks. Like, there's a couple of things that could compare, but none bring the same kind of value, like active protection, airdrop capability in a single plane for all that you have in your deck. It's ridiculously good. Then we get into helicopters. So 4 killer eggs right here, very cheap, very good helicopters for air-to-air capability in terms of dealing with other helicopters. I prefer, if I'm going to fight other helicopters, I prefer to have it on a light helicopter, and funnily enough, a lot of people have seemed to agree with that conclusion if the matches I've seen online are anything to go by, because I rarely see people installing things like Stingers or Iglas on their expensive attack helicopters. They install it on cheap helicopters, if they can. Well, Russians will do it on their more expensive stuff, but on the American side, you will see, you know, Super Cobras and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of people will use Kiowas or they'll use killer eggs just because they're very cheap from that perspective. So that's what I use killer eggs for. Then we got Comanche. You could install like Stingers on a Comanche, but I just vastly prefer to have a bunch of 18 missiles, go in there, do a bunch of damage with these, and because of their stealth profile, they can sneak up behind the enemy line and just like send them on a journey and flying at a low altitude behind enemy lines. They might not be detected. A lot of people really need to invest better in recon because being able to do that should not be something you'd get away with. But you do, even in higher ranked matches. Then Guardians, so they obviously don't have the stealth profile, but they do have certain advantages in their own right. With respect to armament, they're more expensive, but they do have guided rockets, so if there's an infantry in a building or lighter vehicles that can take them out, they have a bunch of anti-tank missiles and the Lair CM ACM system. It's a bit of a shame that you can't install Stingers and the ECM, and if I'm going to choose between them, I would rather my big, expensive, almost 300-point helicopter be able to take a hit, because they'll avoid it with the ECM. So that's, like, if I could install Stingers as opposed to guided rockets, I'd probably do so, but not versus the ECM. Then two CV-22B Ospreys for Special Forces, minigun, just 10 points each, not a problem. Ospreys are pretty fast vehicles. They can't transport very heavy loads, but they'll be able to transport most of your infantry very quickly. A Chinook, if you do want to transport stuff that's, heavier, because if we look at the transport capacity, it might not work with the Thunderbolt, but it will work with a bunch of different things in your deck. Though keep in mind, keep in mind some of the things. Like the Avenger actually doesn't work with the loadout that I give it. I think the Avenger could be transported by default, but not with double Stinger pods, interestingly enough. Or it might just be the armor I've installed on it. Yeah, it's probably the armor that I've installed on it. Anyway, it's just kind of worth saying on that. Technically, you could get a Chinook with that if you want to. I just prefer having the armor, smoke, that kind of stuff. But that's a decision on that you may have to make. But yeah, lots of helicopters, transport capability. We do have vehicles for transporting infantry, but really mainly you're going to use helicopters. Like you can transport infantry and MTVs. You do also have some MK-47s right there for transporting some groups of infantry, but really mainly you're going to use helicopters. And that's one of the downsides. It's all about air mobility for the most part. But obviously, if the skies are so contested that you can't use helicopters, then that's a big problem with this deck. Usually, though, the only times I encounter those situations, to be quite blunt about it, is when someone leaves. And very popular for people to go AFK in the middle of a match, not leave the match, disconnect but don't desert. You lose as much ELO as if they stayed for the entire match and fought it properly. Yes, that is genuinely obnoxious, and it's actually killing my enjoyment of the game. I was planning originally making this video once I got to 1k ELO, and then I was like, after fighting 4 matches where that happened back to back today, I'm like, fuck that. And some people leave at the beginning of matches. Some people leave, oh, we just took a couple of cruise missiles on the wrong side, we're just gonna quit. Then you see people with 1k ELO moving their vehicles in column formation. Then you see people posting like, oh, you need concentration forts to take a point. You do, not in the way you're doing it though. Because, like, you want to know how you take a point, you don't send 4 tanks, one after another on a road in column formation. You drop 10 infantry units on it. That's where we get... That's why the Global Master is so ridiculous. Oh, you want to drop 102 men on top of a victory point? You can do so. That is ridiculous. You're probably not going to ever use that full capacity, but the value of the Global Master compared to, say, the MC and all that, really boils down to this. Like the capacity, the capability of carrying freaking tanks is not insignificant. And also, when we look at it, it's the speed question as well. So so that's the reason I only have with C-17. If you want to use airdrop, you could just get rid of the AC-130 for the sake of having another transport helicopter in this deck. Just keep in mind that things are not nailed in stone. But with regards to infantry, we get into it. So I do have two little birds. These can be useful for scouting as helicopters because they do have the optronic system. So if your drones are just constantly getting shot down in the sky and are not getting information, get a couple of little birds. That's, using a helicopter that's mainly designed to transport stuff as an actual scout. Yeah, that sounds like a very America thing. Silent Hawks, for transporting stealth. Like, don't have the capacity of Ospreys or Chinooks, but they won't be seen. Pretty important. Mobility. You want to know how you use infantry in real life? You want to, or how militaries use infantry in real life, or how infantry fights wars? They don't sit on their asses in building. They don't even sit in trenches. Hell, not even Russia did that in 2023. Actually, do you know what Russia did in 2023? They left their trenches empty. They positioned their troops behind them. When Ukraine bombarded them with artillery, they basically lost very few people. Then Ukraine reached those trenches, and then it's like, surprise! You get bombarded by artillery once you reach our trenches. That is what happened in real life. Anyway, Delta forces. So close quarters, you can get standoff capability by. That's not the value of Delta force. Like, if you want standoff capability, there's plenty of it to be had. Delta force has one role and one role alone. To go in buildings, they have a good amount of smoke grenades. They have those flashbangs, all that. You sprint them to a building, like you drop them from a plane, and then you pop smoke on all your infantry, and then you get them into buildings. Delta Force will kill any other unit if they enter a building, even if they're heavily damaged. Like, you can send 4 Delta Force guys in a building filled with infantry. They might not win, depending on what they're dealing with, but they'll do a heck of a lot of damage. They are not a joke to consider in that respect. Then we have the Rangers with the Maw weapon. Carl Gustaf, M4 Carl Gustaf. 3 of these. These will wreck any armor vehicle that's in range. And since a lot of maps and a lot of control points have limited line sight, then you can hide infantry behind stuff. Basically, tanks are forced to try and zip around around stuff. Their engagement range is very low, so they can hit things from a very low. Like, there's no minimum range to consider. There's no real setup time. It is a bit, but it doesn't compare to a javelin. We have those as well. Don't worry, we'll get to them. But yeah, these guys are really, really good from that perspective. Just dumping AT missiles on anything. These will kill Abrams. They will kill Armatas. They're something like a quarter of the cost of it. You dump 4 of these Rangers on top of a control point. You're taking with Delta in it. You're taking that control point, or you're killing almost everything in sight. If I were to see something like that being airdropped on me, like, you might say, oh, you can't get sky blasts. Again, unless your team is playing so freaking badly that virtually every approach to a control point, you might not get every control point in range, but you hit the one that's closest to you. You set up infantry, then you hopefully get some supporting fire from your allies who should be paying attention to what's going in a game, as opposed to not doing anything when someone's just dumped 1,000 point on a control point and killed a lot of units, and you're just saying they're AFK. Yes, I may or may not be first rate. Then we have Rangers with MK47 Mark 47s, grenade launcher. So these guys, the Mark 47 is a really, really good grenade launcher. Can kill a lot of units. Like, if there's a clump of infantry moving towards these guys, they'll kill it. If there's infantry buildings, they can do a good amount of damage. Even some very light vehicles, they'll do decently against us. Like, as far as line holders are concerned, like, yeah, Rangers with the Mark 47, they're there. Then a bunch of Stingers, because we don't have air-to-air capability. So Stinger teams, no vehicle associated with them, just 2 Stingers per team. Just, that's the role. Like, perimeter control, deal with enemy helicopters. Like, that's actually the main concern, like, I have. Like, dealing with enemy helicopters that might attack certain points. Then we have weapon teams, 2 javelins. You can go with tows if you want to. There's all kinds of different options, to be sure, on this, but I do prefer going with the weapon team because they do have 2 javelins. Ammunition might be a bit of an issue, but having 2 javelins means you can penetrate active protection systems. And then some airborne with next generation weapons. Not really the most useful thing in the world from a lot of things, but just a bit of a varied unit, and kind of like you need to leave someone to hold the point, right? It might just be 1 or 2 units, but you need to leave someone that can, deal with all kinds of different things. Like, you don't want to keep Delta Force or Ranger Maws or Stingers or weapon teams necessarily holding a point. You kind of want to move on a perimeter or keep moving. And that's basically why I brought some next generation weapon airborne troops. That's the role. You drop 1 or 2 of these. They stay behind, everyone moves. And these guys are the ones that catch the cruise missiles and artillery once the enemy has collected themselves. if they haven't already started launching the moment they detect what the hell is coming their way. And by the way, I want to stress this out. When you're dropping shit via plane, the moment your boots hit the ground, start microing your units. I swear, like, people are like, APH, actions per hour. Like, what is this? The video game for grandpas? No, then that's insulting to grandpas, because I've seen grandpas play video game. I've seen people, grandpa playing Battlefield and sniping guys across the map. No, call it a pet peeve of mine, but I think, for me personally, if there's anything that this game has really made clear, is that a lot of people in strategy games talk about, like, oh, this game is too micro-intensive, I want to be slower because it's more strategic, and then you watch them play a slower game and they play like complete bricks. Don't play like a complete brick, but do assume a lot of your teammates will on all levels and build around that. So this is you're a firefighter. View it from that like that. You're taking targets of opportunity, you're responding to situations. Someone takes a point, you drop a cruise missile on them or nuke on them. Enemy is pushing on the flank, send in the choppers. Enemy has a lot of artillery and air defense location, sneak a bunch of choppers or drop a nuke. Or fire a bunch of cruise missiles. Or both. Save a bunch of points. Doesn't matter if all of your units die. Like, don't be afraid of taking units onto the battlefield. Like, if once you've taken a point, you want your infantry to move out, or you might just call in a helicopter and get them off the map. And that is a genuine thing you can do. And there's no reason not to. The reason you don't want to just have a lot of units on the map is because you'll gain points faster the less units you have. Obviously, there's a balancing act on that, but literally, as long as you can do enough damage to the enemy, doesn't matter how many units you lose. Like, you might have the highest the highest death score on your team, but you might also have the highest kill count on the team. No joke. They kind of balance them out. In fact, I've helped teams win matches where where I'm at. Like, just dropping 10 infantry units on a point really screws over an enemy team in a lot of ways, especially if they thought that point was protected because they have some S400s in the back. Well, those S400s haven't seen that C-17 by the time I've dropped stuff. Worth saying. That's all I had to say. Christine, signing.